Heavy downpours are creating multiple counties under flash flood warnings, and that flood risk is going to continue overnight. Everything you need to know.
Plus, a local family frustrated after learning medical services close to home are closing.
Plus, protesters are marching through downtown Columbia. We're live with the latest. This is KOMU8 News at 10.
Coverage you can count on. KOMU8 News starts now.
A lot to get to tonight, but first, we got to talk about that. Chief Meteorologist Ken Najwicki, he's been tracking these overnight storms and some ongoing flooding. Good evening, everyone. I'm Emily Spain. Thanks for joining us. So, Kenton, where are the areas of concern right now?
So, Emily, it's actually kind of a wide area. We're talking about multiple counties now that are dealing with some flash flooding. You can see this large line of showers and thunderstorms that's been forming up and moving through. But really, this area we're watching for is in our northeastern viewing area. I'm talking about all of Monroe County, much of Audrain County, northern Callaway County, and the entire northeastern corner of Boone County. It's where we've had rain. It's been heavy. It's been lasting for more than 2 hours in some locations, which is why we have a flash flood warning there. And some roads that usually don't flood ever, they're flooding because this water has nowhere to go. And it's not stopping. It's just sitting there and it's not going away. There's still a lot of rain to come through still. So if we go ahead and look at some hail, there is a little bit of hail with this, but that's not the main risk anymore. There is still some pea-sized hail in that purple area. But for the most part, it's the rain that we're looking at. It's cloud to ground lightning and some breezy wind gusts, but nothing severe at this point. So it's just this flash flood warning. And anywhere in this green area, because of how much rain has fallen, there's a chance that roads are already flooding or are going to start to flood at any moment with flash flooding. And again, the rain's going to continue here still. You can see some areas, this is just a 2-hour lapse. You can see some areas have already had this heavy downpour for more than 2 hours, right? Avage. And some folks have talked about anywhere from 2 to potentially 4 inches per hour rainfall rates. And it's been falling for more than an hour in most locations. So some places have seen up to 5, 6 inches of rainfall. That's what we're talking about. This is a very large system. We're going to wait for that to come through. And then another system tomorrow morning coming in from the west. So plenty to talk about still as the night goes on. I'll be tracking it coming up in the full forecast. Emily.
Okay, thanks, Kenton. Here's what's happening right now. Another night of protests in Columbia. KOMU8's Daniel Pro has been following the protesters and the police as they move around in downtown Columbia. Daniel, what's going on right now?
Protesters are about to end the march for tonight. They were just a moment ago on the MU campus. They walked back up 8th Street and are now here at the Boone County Courthouse, wrapping up another night of protest here. Tonight we saw some interesting things. One of the most interesting to me was Columbia police were walking alongside protesters for most of the night. I talked to an officer. He says they've been doing it for the last 2 nights. You have to think that has something to do with when protesters says it has something to do with what happened on Monday night with 2 protesters getting hit by cars. Columbia police say they walk alongside to make sure that nobody messes with them and there's no damage that is done. Protesters were all over town tonight. They say they'll be back out here at 5:30 tomorrow. Reporting live in Columbia, Daniel Pro, KOMU8 News.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. In Mexico, Missouri tonight, 2 different events to remember the life of George Floyd and protest racial injustice. Demonstrators held signs as they marched around Lakeview Park. They shared stories of how they had been racially profiled and discriminated against for their race. Leaders read names of 20 black people who died while in police custody. The crowd chanted, "Persecute the police," and many also laid on the ground with their hands tied behind their backs, yelling, "I can't breathe."
We just wanted to be as peaceful as possible and bring as many people out in the community that wanted to come to express how they felt. You heard prayers, you heard stories. Everybody hasn't always left Mexico, so everybody doesn't know what the next person has been through in life.
The Audrain County Sheriff was there and talked with people at 2 separate events. There was another one in downtown, a different group there that gathered at the square. They held a vigil for Floyd. This was the first one that we were talking about where they were holding signs and laying on the ground as well. Well, demonstrations continue nationwide as more charges are filed in the death of George Floyd. We're going to take a live look here now at some of those demonstrations. We do not have that live shot for you, but they're happening all over the country. This is in California, where hundreds gathered at a local police department. LA County issued a curfew to take place that will start at 9 p.m. and lasts until 5 a.m. tomorrow. In South Florida, hundreds gathered for a different form of protest. Demonstrators there participated in a police-escorted funeral procession. The motorcade symbolizes a worldwide day of mourning. And at the nation's capital, some Capitol police officers taking a knee in solidarity. Last night, police allowed demonstrators to defy curfews to give them space to protest as long as it remained peaceful. These protests come as all 4 officers now involved in the death of George Floyd are now in police custody. Today, Minnesota Attorney General said Officer Derek Chauvin's primary charge was upgraded from third-degree murder to second-degree murder while committing a felony. The other officers you see here all face charges of aiding and abetting second-degree murder. Each officer is being held on $1 million bail. Former Cole County prosecutor Bill Tackett says charging these police officers with second-degree murder will be hard to prove. He says police officers can use force when arresting someone who might be fighting back. Tackett says there are 3 points the prosecutor has to tackle in order to win this case.
You're dealing with a specific jury instruction on use of force. Were they justified in their use of force? That's number 1. Number 2, then, you got to prove the assault. And then number 3, the causation that he died from the assault.
George Floyd's family says they are grateful Minnesota attorney charged all of the officers involved in Floyd's arrest. Crime Stoppers is offering a $10,000 reward after a retired St. Louis police officer was killed during a protest. Police say 77-year-old retired police captain David Dorn was shot by looters while trying to protect a Missouri pawn shop Monday night. His son now pleading for peace.
Called me just crying and bawling and like, they shot and killed Dad. They shot and killed Dad. Just step back from what you're doing. Know the real reason that you're protesting. Let's do it in a positive manner.
Dorn's murder is one of many attacks on former law enforcement, current law enforcement since the death of George Floyd last week. President Trump and the Ethical Society of Police paid tributes to Captain Dorn on Twitter. Meanwhile, St. Louis County is asking protesters to quarantine over concerns about the spread of coronavirus. We're still in a pandemic. Officials say they're worried days of protests over Floyd's death might reverse progress that St. Louis County has made with the pandemic. They're asking people who didn't wear masks or socially distance themselves during the protests to quarantine. Back here in mid-Missouri, 11 more inmates have tested positive for the virus at the Saline County Jail. All the inmates and employees got tested for it after an inmate tested positive last Thursday. The 12 people that have tested positive are under quarantine. As of today, no employees have tested positive. State officials reported 192 new cases today. Boone County reported 9 new cases with 33 known active cases there. Audrain County reports 11 new cases with 38 active cases there. Former Secretary of Defense James Mattis says President Trump is not trying to unite the country during protests. This is the first time Mattis has spoken publicly since leaving the administration. The former Secretary of State says, quote, Donald Trump is the first president in my lifetime who does not try to unite the American people, does not even pretend to try. Instead, he tries to divide us, end quote. President Trump breaking his silence on the protest today. On Fox News Radio, President Trump acknowledged police departments need to change, but is also urging a forceful crackdown against riots and looting. President Trump also denying he took cover in a White House bunker during Friday night's demonstrations. He is also threatening to send the National Guard in to New York. In his daily briefing today, Governor Parson here in Missouri said he is sending National Guardsmen to D.C. to help with protests there. The exact number Missouri will send hasn't been decided yet. For comparison, Maryland and Ohio each sent 100 troops earlier this week. Parson also activated 1,000 troops to assist law enforcement at violent protests throughout Missouri. Missouri Senator Josh Hawley responded to the video of George Floyd's death. Hawley says he supports peaceful protesters who are calling for justice, but says those who use the protests to commit violent acts need to be held accountable. Through all of this, protesters have brought to the surface a lot of complex and systemic issues that they say need to be addressed. Senator Hawley says the best way to do that is focus on jobs.
You've got to be able to give young people in particular hope and have them be able to say, you know what, I'll be able to get a job here. I'll be able to support a family here. I'll have a stake in society here. If they can't say that, then they don't feel like they've got any future. And that's true no matter where they live, by the way. That's true no matter what their skin color.
Hawley says deploying the military onto streets of American cities should be the last resort, but adds that it is important for state and local leaders to send a clear message that they will not put up with violence. The Senate passed a bill that gives Payment Protection Plan recipients more flexibility. Senators passed the act tonight unanimously. The measure gives businesses more time to use loan money designed to help them during the pandemic. The bill also lowers how much of the money must be used to fund payroll from 75% down to 60%. That bill now heads to President Trump's desk. Coming up, a Mid-Missouri family frustrated to learn medical services close to home will be no more. Plus, Ferguson, Missouri is in the national spotlight again after a historic election.
Showers and thunderstorms continuing here in central Missouri. And if you're in Columbia or Jefferson City or Ashland wondering, is it going to rain here? Yes, it's literally knocking on the door right now. This entire line's going to push off towards the west. We also have a new addition into our flash flood warning as expected. Randolph County are getting heavy rain, and it's going to continue. Flash flooding starting to occur there as well. We'll keep you updated. Full forecast after the break.